And it frees the relationship when we don't feel like we have to control or take on someone else's issue. But Lord gave you a picture
Yes.
several years ago.
I think I know what she's talking about, Kim. It's out of Matthew 6, where God talks about the splinter in your eye versus the log in someone else's. I was counseling with somebody who was not taking personal responsibility for some messes, and she just kept wanting to blame the other person. God showed me that it was like a tennis match, and you needed to keep your eye on your side of the net only. And she was looking at the other side of the net instead of her side. And that is such a visual for personal responsibility.
Welcome to Book Therapy. I'm your host, Kim Patton. There's no way to count how many books are floating around in this world. Some are decent, some are truly terrible, and some are great. Today we're going to take a deep dive into one great book. Together we will discover gems of truth and encouragement to help you face your current season of life. I'm ready, you're ready, let's get this party started. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Book Therapy. I have a double guest for you today. It is a special episode because not only do I have two guests, but I have had their family member here before. William Daniel was on the show, episode 14. William Daniel and I shared a much lighter conversation than today's episode, but it's been a joy to get to know this family, and I know that you're going to love them. I hope you will be encouraged by this conversation. Enjoy the show. Let's jump into the book. Today we are talking about Mended, Restoring the Hearts of Mothers and Daughters by Blythe Daniel and Helen McInstosh. This is a very special book. I read it a few years ago when I was looking for resources about strengthening the mother-daughter relationship. And I actually got the chance to meet Blythe Daniel, and so I was extra motivated to read the book. But I wasn't brave enough to talk about it on the podcast until now. And I'm extra brave because I have the authors here. So welcome to the show, Blythe and Helen.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you so much. We're so delighted to be with you. And thank you for choosing to read our words for mothers and daughters in the book Mended.
Blythe is a literary agent and marketer, and she has a lot of experience in the publishing industry. She is the daughter of Dr. Helen, who has been married for over 50 years. We were just talking about any advice she has for a strong marriage. And she said, every word matters. So we all know that I'm in big trouble. We're going to talk about healthy moms and daughters. So this is a loaded conversation. I wrote about my relationship with my mom in my book a little bit, but anyone who knows me personally knows that this really is a complicated subject. And my mom and I have been through so much over the 35 years that she's been my mom. I wrote her an essay, and she read the essay and said, I didn't realize that you loved me this much. And that was a beautiful thing to hear, but also a really hard thing to hear, because that meant that I wasn't conveying to her how much she meant to me. And our relationship has had a lot of challenges in my adult life, especially. But I believe that this book speaks to the gospel. First of all, I say that because God's heart is restoration, redemption, healthy relationships, communication, being honest and open with each other. And I love that, Helen, you have a degree or multiple degrees in psychology, because that came out in the book a lot. And I minored in psychology. I love the complicated mind that God gave us and the tools that we can use to better our relationships. So first, we're going to talk about how healthy moms and daughters value relationship over differences. So Helen, you say on page 37, when I was growing up, I wanted to be closer to mom. She wanted to be right.
Yep.
And then you say on the next page, often we let our differences of opinions get in the way of our relationship with our mother and daughter. We have to let those go and put the relationship ahead of our differences, even if it means not trying to prove we are right. Releasing your need to be right in order to reconnect to your mother or daughter is key, and we want to share ways to help this happen. So throughout the book, you do give lots of practical tips and tools for restoring relationship. But talk to me about why it's so important to value the relationship over being right.
Well, I coached a number of young women before the election to be able to say to an angry parent or friend, and they were about to get into it, to say, it's okay. We don't have to agree on anything, but I want us to remain friends. And the relationship is just more important than an idea. So I'd call that clarification, to clear up what could have been a problem for so many. But to just go ahead and state, we're okay if we disagree. We don't have to agree on anything, but we do need to hold tight and protect the relationship. So it's just a good thing to think about.
Just was going to say, but when you were growing up with your mom, even having to think through how she may have wanted to have control and wanted to be right, but you really desired the relationship.
That's interesting, Blythe. That's a good insight.
You didn't necessarily have the words back then to necessarily say some of the things that you've learned since then, but your heart was more towards their relationship than who was right. It wasn't important to you as a child or a young adult.
And I grew up wishy-washy, which is I'm not proud of. So, because I so didn't want to have a wrong opinion. But God's released me from that now. So I'm okay with being strong in what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have to insist that my friends or loved ones have the same opinion.
Right. There's an example near the end of the book of a friend who had 18-month-old daughters, and they both wanted to wear the fancy red shoes to church, and they were arguing about who got to wear the fancy red shoes. And they problem solved. They figured out, okay, mommy, look, we figured out we can each wear one red shoe and one white shoe. And they were very proud of this. And I thought of my own daughters. I was like, this is something I could see them doing. And of course, the mom was frustrated. It's Sunday morning. She's trying to get 3 kids out of the house. Nobody wears 2 different shoes. It's not socially acceptable. And so she was upset and she made them change. I think that's our tendency, right? Is to control, to change the situation, to appear better to others. I am very focused on appearance, and I want to make sure that I'm not being judged and I'm not being looked at differently, and I'm not being told I'm a certain kind of mother. So how do we as mothers and daughters get to a place where we're okay with each other making decisions like wearing one red shoe and one white shoe and it not affecting us personally?
I think that I'll speak as the child, and then mom can chime in, but I think that we have to get to a place where we are able to work things out with a sibling, and we don't always need a mom to come in and say this is how it should be done, because that is the goal as parents, is to allow your children to learn how to work things out between them. But there are times that a mom needs to step in and can step in, but I did love that example of our friend whose children problem solved. And then the response from us would be, well, what will people think if my children come in this way? Or what would people think that it reflects me as a mother, that my kids aren't handling that they're not doing what I tell them to do. But what would you say, like as the adult in this situation?
I tell you, my friend that told me this story, her husband is the minister. It's just real important that we assess what's going on in our hearts. And if we have any people pleasing in us, we need to weed that out as quickly as we can, because it's a terrible, terrible disease.
But that's a problem, because this whole book is just pinpointing all of my tendencies and all of my struggles. I mean, I look at how many tabs I have in the book because I was like, oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. Oh, I do that all the time. Oh, yeah, that's me. Oh, man, I'm in trouble.
Oh,
Another thing, I like how you talk about the heart behind our words. So if we're correcting our children, if we're correcting our mom, my heart is often not considering her point of view or not considering my daughter's feelings. I kind of tested myself today as I was reviewing the book, and I pulled my daughter on my lap. She's 4.5. And I said, hey, this is a book about moms and daughters, and it talks about how we can love each other and better serve each other. Does mommy sometimes say and do things that hurts your feelings? And she was like, yes. I was like, ah.
yeah, very honest.
She jumped right in. And I said, like what? And she's like, when you tell me to go to my room. And I was like, okay, you don't like to be alone? And she's like, no. And when you shut the door, I said, okay, I will think about that and I will work on that and realize that you don't like to be alone. And she hopped off my lap and, went to watch Barney with her sister. But something as little as that of my heart, when we're upset as moms, we have 50,000 things running through our brain. And I like, Blythe, how you gave a lot of examples in the book about your kids in gymnastics and you're in college and you're having to make decisions and you don't necessarily want to hear what others who are wiser have to say. You admit, like, you take a posture of humility throughout the book, which I think is really important. And often I think with my mom, I just feel like she'll love me no matter what. I can be whoever I want to be and I can say whatever I want to say because she will never abandon me. She's a great mom. And I think I've treated her badly and I haven't looked at the posture of my heart in my interactions with her.
We see parts of ourselves in our moms, or we see what we could become. And I love how mom chose not to repeat the patterns that her mom had. So, and she can share more on that, but just her mom's angry words to her and her actions to mom that made her feel less than, that made her feel belittled. And mom could have like chosen to repeat that, but she also showed respect to her mom. So she didn't badmouth her to her face, like, but she knew that she didn't want to become like her mom. And so she chose to do things differently. And I feel like for you, for me, for all of us who are in that place of like, oh, wow, we could have done that better with our kids, is that we at least are aware of it, right?
That's
And
important.
we can start over. In fact, we do have a chapter, that talks about that, like just starting over and choosing differently. And I think that we're not always going to get it right. And I mean, mom and I have been open. We've not always gotten it right with each other, and me as a daughter and her as a mom. And yet we just try and start where we are and work from there. What else would you add to
I
that?
would say, Kim, one of the, we tried to put as many sentences in the book of words you could say to heal.
Mhm.
So maybe there's two dozen or 3 dozen sentences of that somebody could use as lines in a play. And the one I'm thinking about that on the subject that you brought up is I was wrong and I'm so sorry. Will you forgive me? I mean, a family drama can be over that quick. And it's just these simple words. I was wrong. It's hard to say, but if you can say it, do it.
Yeah, I love those scripts. I'm always looking for the next book to read, and there's a book called Parenting Scripts, and it's by the same people who wrote Triggers, which is about anger and motherhood. And I have the Triggers ebook that I'm terrible at reading ebooks, so I've had it forever and I haven't read it fully yet. But I saw this other one, Parenting Scripts, and I told my husband about it, and he's rolling his eyes again. He's like, "You don't need more books," and I'm like, I do need more books. I need people to give me scripts of what to do and how to say things. And I liked your scripts in bold throughout the book. In fact, most of my bookmarks are near those scripts because it's important to have the words to say. And at my job, we work with kids in trauma, and we need we need scripts. We need to be able to have a phrase or a sentence to say, hey, I see that you're having a hard time. Would you like to go to your room to cool down or sit on the front porch? Can I make you a snack? And it offers them like, okay, you see that they're upset. And usually they're so upset that they're just like, I don't want anything. And they, storm out and do whatever they want. But the goal is to make them feel seen and then offer something to them physiologically that helps their, what's it called? Their nervous system calm down. I don't know if that's right. You're the psychology guru, so you can.
Yeah, your brain waves.
And so being outside, being in fresh air, having a snack, or being alone and calming the sensory input way down. So I like having those scripts. I just need the self-control in the moment to not say, why are you being so mean? Why, like, what did I do to you? And say, hey, how can I help you?
Yeah. I think if we continue to see that they acted out of a need, that their behavior had a lot to do with a need, and if we can get to that need, then the drama's over.
Yep, it disarms them.
It feels personal, but it's not.
Yeah, I love how you've shared over the years, Mom, that like people act out of a response to a need, and that people can often try and blame someone else for you made me angry or you made me this, but we didn't cause them to be angry.
Right.
They acted out of their
Choice.
their choice or their emotions. And so we can kind of go back to that and just say, I know this is something that you've used too a lot with us, is like, even, is what you're doing helping or hurting you get what you need?
Right.
And that was a phrase that you used a lot when you were counseling younger kids, even.
It was.
Yeah.
Dr. Bill Glasser taught me these wonderful words of self-evaluation. He helped me to be very sensitive to children's needs. Most of the children that were brought to my counseling office at the school setting where I spent 12 years, they often got in trouble or had crying jags because they were hungry or didn't get any sleep. Something else was going on. And so one of the first questions I would ask them is, what is it that you need? And then what is it that you want? And did it help you or hurt you to get what you want? And we'd make a plan. It was a good thing to teach self-evaluation.
So the second thing we're going to talk about is taking responsibility for actions. And like you said, Blythe, there's a phrase in here that really got me, and it was when you guys said, when our children say, you made me mad, we remind them, I didn't cause you to get mad. You felt the emotion of anger and then you acted on it, but I'm not responsible for the way you behaved. So when we're taking responsibility for our actions, we are not taking responsibility for others' actions. And you also talk about not needing to carry the weight of other people's choices. And what happens if I put down that weight? So talk to me about the weight that we carry when we, like you said, take things personally. Let's say someone says something mean or cruel in our mother-daughter relationship, and we think, man, they're just out to get me and they're treating me this way because of whatever. Why do we carry that weight of other people's choices, and how can we release it?
The delete button on a computer. we need to do the same thing with our emotional baggage. I believe we need to keep short accounts and go to the Lord and clear out each issue, and that way there's nothing in the baggage claim.
I think that one of the things that we've talked about is that we do have a sense a lot of times as women to emotionally connect with a mom or a daughter, and we can take on things that will take us down a road of performance. And if someone doesn't say something that we like, we feel like we need to perform better, or we can blame ourselves for the way someone responds to us when really it's their issues. And I've loved how Mom has had different visuals over the years, and I'll let her share one of those. And I think that it really helps us understand what we are able to let go of, and it frees the relationship when we don't feel like we have to control or take on someone else's issue. But Lord gave you a picture
Yes.
several years ago.
I think I know what she's talking about, Kim. It's out of Matthew 6 where God talks about the splinter in your eye versus the log in someone else's. Well, I was counseling with somebody who was not taking personal responsibility for some messes, and she just kept wanting to blame the other person. And God showed me that it was like a tennis match, and you needed to keep your eye on your side of the net only. And she was looking at the other side of the net instead of her side. And that is such a visual for personal responsibility. So where are you looking?
I felt that a lot. Even if my mom were to say something negative to me and I, would take offense to it, I almost always reacted in anger or frustration or even hung up the phone on her. And I mean, that's so disrespectful. I wasn't doing my part. I was reacting and then not caring about hurting her, because if I felt hurt, then I was just going to lash out. It always surprised me that I treated my mom that way and I didn't treat other people that way. Occasionally my husband, I will admit that, but I didn't want to be that kind of person. And yet my mom saw the ugliest side of me, and I was not taking responsibility for my side. I was using her words or her actions as an excuse to do whatever I wanted.
Would you say too, like when you were growing up, you felt that with your own mom, that we often will hurt the people that we love or the people that are the closest to us? I mean, you felt that. And how did you handle that?
The Lord put a sentence in my head, and that was that hurting people will lash out on people they know will not lash back. And she knew that I wouldn't hurt her. I really think she knew that.
Mm-hmm. So when she would, say things to you at that point, you took it in, but then really there came a point where, and maybe, you would maybe leave the room or try to do something that would earn some favor with her some more. But you got to the point where you knew that the Lord had provided a way out for you, which was that He made a relationship possible with Him that took away that pain. Not that it didn't go away all the way, but
we did have joy talking about the Lord. Yes, I got to lead her to Christ, and then we did a number of studies together on emotions, healthy emotions. So there was a lot of redemption at the end.
It's hard with our kids because we lash out on them knowing, like you said, they can't do anything back to us. I mean, my kids are really little, so they can't hurt me. And that hurts my heart, because if I'm choosing to be snappy when I could be gentle and kind, they're the vulnerable ones. They're the younger ones. I'm the one who's supposed to have self-control. It's convicting that as a mom, my job is to cry out to the Lord for the fruit of the Spirit, because I don't have self-control. I need Him to give me self-control. And the best thing I can do right now is apologize when I do lash out and say, I'm sorry for yelling, or I'm sorry for putting you in your room when I know that you don't like to be alone. Next time, let's try to figure out something that works for both of us. I am in control right now. I think as they get older, they're strong-willed, so they're gonna give it right back to me.
May I make a suggestion? Kim, ask them what they can see that you doing instead of closing the door. Ask them for a plan and see what they might say.
I think my 3-year-old will probably say, "Why don't you just give me a cookie and then everything would be all better, Mom?"
Well, let us know what happens.
Yeah, I will. I'll ask them, see what they say.
That comes from your training that kids like to be a part of the solution sometimes?
Yes, always.
Did that help when we were growing up? If you asked my brother and I what...
I'm sorry to say that I didn't have that information back then. I'm so sorry, but I think we didn't have to have many issues. Every single quote I think that we put in this book, the last line is, "What do you think we need to do to make things better?" And so when you are the one that has been injured, it's very redeeming to ask that person, the person that hurt you, "What do you think we need to do to make things better?" You're giving them some power, but it's really personal responsibility. I love doing that with small children because they come up with some wonderful plans. They really do.
That's a good idea. Anytime we're like, as an employee, you like to be asked what your opinion is. You like to be asked, hey, how do we problem solve? At our meeting yesterday, they said, hey, we're having trouble scheduling therapy appointments and communicating who's transporting which kid to the therapy appointments and to the doctor. And we have a transporter, but she can't do everything. So can you help us brainstorm a few ways we can do this better? Being in on part of the problem solving, I think, is a great tool. And I know I can use that with my older daughter because I have asked her to help me problem solve occasionally. Usually my husband is my problem solver, but if he's not around, my 4.5-year-old is.
Great.
So I'm definitely going to use that.
Good.
Okay, so the last thing is healthy moms and daughters give and receive feedback with gentleness and respect. And this is a big one. I think when I talk to my friends or other people who have relationships with mothers and daughters, they say often that the pain point is unsolicited advice. And there's a lot of content in the book about this topic, and I think rightly so. On page 122, Blythe, you say, as I've parented my children, Mom has asked me from time to time, may I make a suggestion? What do you think about saying this? Or is it okay if I share some feedback with you? Is it okay for me to give you an idea of how to help? And it paves the way for me to say yes or no, not right now. Most of the time I have taken her advice because it really was good feedback. Sometimes I have filtered it through what I was thinking about at the time and taken bits and pieces and applied it with mine. Our parents are wise, but sometimes we don't care. We want to do things our own way. I think I've told my mom, I love making my own mistakes. I love learning the hard way. I love doing what I want and then seeing how it goes. And she's always trying to help me do things better because she's raised 7 kids. She knows how the world works. But sometimes we just like to do it anyways, and we like to fall on our face and learn from our mistakes. So talk to me about your relationship and how you have grown over the years in giving and receiving feedback.
I love the question, what do you think about? Because it isn't like she's telling me what I should think. It's offering me the option to hear her idea. And so back to something that you said earlier, it really is this relationship between mothers and daughters is a relationship of humility. And I think when we can come humbly to each other and respect each other in a way where it's not saying that my needs aren't important, but it's also helping put our relationship above my needs or my desires and being humble and having humble, honoring questions with each other. It seeks to make the other person elevated a little bit more. It's not like putting them on a pedestal, but it's like if the Lord has told us to be honoring our parents, a way that we can do that is by listening. It doesn't mean we have to act on what they share, but I just see it as kind of a humble place and a place of honor to listen to their feedback. And so I love the way that Mom will say, hey, do you mind if I give you some feedback on that? And so it's kind of a gentle way of coming into a conversation. And I think a lot of times, like what you said earlier, we don't like to be told what to do. The unsolicited advice, people like respond negatively to that. And I think that's because we want to be seen as being able to figure it out on our own. Yet our mothers have a lot of times, more experience and wisdom that they can offer. And so it's, to me, a lot of times like choosing where do I want to grow in my role here with God helping me, or where do I want to grow in my role with my mom helping me because she probably knows a little more than I do on this topic. And it's a balance, isn't it? Like of just praying into like, God, what am I supposed to take out of this conversation? And I think we've tried to approach that with our conversations where you'll say to me sometimes, okay, if this is of the Lord, let whatever I say stick with you. And if it's not of the Lord, let it fall to the side. And that way you're not seen as somebody who's just giving all this information and expecting me to receive it. You're saying, hey, why don't you kind of like test this with the Lord, see if this is coming from him or if this is not of him, but here are some thoughts. And that's sometimes how we've even started a conversation is like,
It is.
do you want to hear a couple of my thoughts right now? And uh so that's kind of how we worked out. Anything else that you can think of?
Well, I grew up bossy because I was copying my mom. And this was intentional language later in life on my part to try and not be bossy. So that's where it came from. I didn't want to be bossy, Blythe.
Yeah. It's wise, and mothers and daughters have a hard time just stating out loud, I don't want to hear that right now, or I appreciate that, but I think I'm not in a place to receive that right now. Like, so instead of like getting angry and, having a response, sometimes we might even just say, you know what, I'm going to think about that. And can we come back to it?
Right.
And it's just, again, kind of trying to honor that relationship, even if it's not something you could see.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's our story.
So as we're wrapping up, I know that there's so much more we can talk about. Like I said, I made so many bookmarks in this book because it's going to be something I come back to. I think God gave me two daughters to humble me because he knew that I would need to work on this mother-daughter relationship, and he gave me two more chances to approach it in a humble way. And I like to think that I'm a fun mom and our life is very adventurous. But with that personality comes reactions. And I'm not a very sit back and think about my words before they fly out of my mouth. So my goal with my daughters is not to change my personality. I think my goal is to come at it with a posture of what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they needing? They come first. In the moment of just playing outside and, they come to me crying or they come to me fighting with each other or they come to me whining about something. What do they need? What's the need behind the behavior? And how can I get on my knees, look at them in the face, and really try to be on their level and be for them? Like I am for them. And I think a lot of times in my parenting journey, I am for myself. I am for the adult. I am for the logical point of view. But what would happen if I enter the toddler brain? And my husband is always encouraging me to do that. And he says I've gotten better at entering their world and like thinking about things the way they think about it. They are not thinking like an adult. Why am I expecting them to think like an adult? I really need to have that posture of humility with them.
You're sure on your way, Kim. You're headed in just the right direction. And you can easily ask a small child to tell you what they're thinking and how you could have done it better. I love their answers so much. And so continue to ask them to tell you how you could have done it better and even act it out with them. That makes it fun.
Yeah.
I hear you saying that you do drama. So act it out and it'll be hilarious. They'll remember it forever.
I will. I love doing anything to make them laugh. That is the goal of my life, is to hear those babies laugh. Unfortunately, our relationships between mothers and daughters do not always end well. They don't always come to a place of resolution. I know, Helen, you had to say goodbye to your mother before there was 100% resolution. And on page 173, you say, sometimes we don't get the mending we want when we'd like it. But you want to get to a place where you can say, my heart is mended even if my relationship isn't yet, and I am okay regardless. My peace is not dependent on the other person. How do we accept the peace of God when relationships are broken?
It's a life skill, it's a life principle, and it's all about our relationship with Him. And if we're at peace with Him, then we'll be at peace with our issues. So most every problem we have can come back to the need of time with Him, that if we give thanks and stay tight with Him, He is going to give us the grace that we need to handle to buffet any situation, any.
I think one of the things that I've watched you do too is just like, you're like, I've done what I can do. And beyond that, it really is out of my control. Like when you know that you've taken care of having conversations and you've taken them as far as you can go, or if you've written a letter or an email or a text or sent a video and you've done your part, that God calls us to do that much, and that we aren't necessarily going to see the outcome we would like to see, but we can always know that we've done our part and we've done all we can do. And that in itself can give us a lot of peace.
Thank you, Blythe. And you brought me to remembrance of Ephesians 6:13. That's where it says, and having done all, to stand. And there's a time when you can just stand and know that you've done all you can do. And you let go.
Okay, before we go, I want you guys to tell me about your memories surrounding Zumba, because I got to that part of the book and I smiled so big. So tell me about Zumba.
Well, Mom started it several years before, maybe a couple years before I really discovered it, and she invited me into it, and I just kind of put it off and just said, no, I don't think so. I mean, it's kind of one of those things of like, I'm glad it's working for her, but I don't think it's for me. I didn't even give it a chance. And then when I came to visit her at one point, we went and I loved it. And, it was one of those things where I didn't realize that she really had something powerful to offer me that would end up being something that has really meant a lot to me and brought joy, just the friendships and the dance and the just the music and all of that. And so for you, it was like, what was that like for you?
I loved watching you. And since that time, I haven't been mobile. So I can't participate right now. I'll say right now, but I hope there's a time in the future when I'll be able to Zumba again. It's so freeing. I love dance. It's a happy antidote for sad times that we're living in. We need to seek those opportunities to be joyful.
It's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Book Therapy Podcast. I had a lot of fun talking to you all. Tell me where we can find you and what projects you have coming up next.
Thank you for having us. We're so grateful. The place that you can find out all about what we are doing, our resources, is connectingheartsandconversations.com. So it has this resource Mended and some others that we have written together. And, we are talking about writing other books. We don't have anything really outlined at this point, but we love the opportunity to provide resources. Our website has books that other family members of ours have written. My son that you've interviewed and my daughter wrote a book on friendships for girls. And so we love anytime that the Lord will give us an opportunity to share on a podcast or write a message that He's put on our heart. And we're grateful that we can do it. It's out of the lessons that we've learned. It's out of the hardships. It's out of the challenges that we come with these resources, because as Mom and I talked about a while back, no one wants to hear from somebody whose lives are all going great and everything's perfect, but if we could use any of the things that we've learned, then that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Kim, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Book Therapy. Today we talked about Mended by Blythe Daniel and Dr. Helen McInstosh. We also mentioned the book You're Joking Me by William Daniel. And again, you can find our podcast episode. It is number 14. The website Blythe mentioned is connectingheartsandconversations.com. And on that website, you'll find several of the books that this family has written. Alrighty, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next time.